Thanks to the medicine which Dr. Said had prescribed for me, I continued to get better. In fact, I was lucky the medicine had been effective and that I didn't need to try any others before finding one which worked for me. It was thanks to this that they told us I could go home after just a week in hospital. This was a surprise for me, because although I was aware of my condition improving, I felt hardly ready to leave the hospital environment. I knew I was safe there, in a place which had become my life preserver in this mental health crisis I was going through. I appreciated Dr. Said's visits. They were reassuring. The nurses had also become real allies. They encouraged me and were now showing me lots of sympathy, especially when I had to say goodbye to my baby each evening as he left for the night. My heart would always ache when the elevator doors closed between us. The social worker who had visited me when I first came to hospital came to see me one last time before I left. The main purpose of the visit was to check we had a good plan organized to make my recovery at home easier, and especially to make sure we had a safety net in place in case my mental health once again showed concerning signs of deterioration. Since we could no longer rely on my mother being with us as she was going home, the social worker wanted to be sure that I had the necessary support to look after Elliot properly and that there was no threat to his safety. Thankfully for us, Gerhard had just set up his own business and was going to be working at home from then on, and he wasn't too busy for the time being. I wasn't going to be left on my own with Elliot, which was important for the moment, since my mood was not yet stable enough. We really didn't want the Child Protection Services getting involved in our situation. Although this was a conversation we needed to have, it didn't leave me feeling overjoyed, as it was the proof that my mental illness was stopping me providing all the care and attention which Elliot constantly needed. This was a real knock to my confidence. I wanted all the very best for my son, and I was terrified by the idea that I was no longer able to fully control my own mental state, and so unable to ensure his absolute safety and well-being. I felt powerless and completely dependent on Gerhard. And yet, it was the thought of going home which made me most afraid. The last time I had been there was when I had been right in the middle of a psychotic episode, and I had dark and painful memories of it. I was scared that my distress might reemerge when I set foot back in the place where it had all begun. Just as I said to the social worker in such frank terms, I went through hell there. I'm not ready to go back. She seemed to understand my distress and took me aside to speak to me. Wanting to be both sympathetic and reassuring, she made me understand that since my condition had improved, they could not justify keeping me in hospital any longer. I was in good hands with my husband. For my well-being, as well as Elliot's and Gerhard's, it was right for me to continue my recovery at home. Before she left, she offered me a further meeting at her office the following week. I found the suggestions comforting. Dr. Said also came to see me before I left. He explained that he was going to make sure I had the right follow-up care in the weeks and months to come. I was to come to the hospital's outpatient department for my meetings with him. We arranged the first meeting right away. This reassured me. I felt that I was being taken care of and I wasn't going to be abandoned in the struggle to recover my mental stability. With reluctance, but feeling a little more hopeful, I started getting together my possessions. It was at this moment that the head nurse of the department came to my room to offer her best wishes. Her thoughtfulness warmed my heart. She asked me if she could hold Elliot. It was so rare to see babies in our department that she wanted to treat herself to a cuddle with mine. She even gave him a little trip down the corridor and showed him to her team of nurses. When she came back to my room, I took the opportunity to express my feelings about how her staff had behaved towards me since I had arrived in her department. I particularly emphasized that some nurses had been rather cool with me at the beginning, and that some of my requests had been ignored. I'd had the distinct impression they thought I was not in my right mind. My behavior had certainly been a little abnormal, but that didn't excuse such an unprofessional way of dealing with me. Mine had been an exceptional case. I should have been put in the psychiatric ward where the nurses would quickly have been able to understand my condition. And yet, this had not been possible because of my baby. I told her it would have been helpful for me if all their staff had been warned about my particular circumstances, so they could have responded to it better. And who knows, another patient in the same situation might turn up in their department one of these days. A good understanding of the symptoms linked to postpartum mood disorders would then be a real asset for nurses, and also for the nurses in the ER. Gerhard told her about our bad experience. At the end, so as not to come across as too negative, I added that some of our nurses had been very sympathetic and welcoming towards me from the start, and that I was very grateful to them. I was really pleased to see how receptive she was to my comments. She promised me that she would have a word with her staff. She even suggested we make a complaint to the ER about how I had been treated. Then she left with a few encouraging remarks for me and a wise smile which is etched into my memory. After gathering together my belongings and a little newfound courage, I felt a bit readier to leave my hospital room. But before I left, I really wanted to say goodbye to the lady I had visited in the room next door. I noticed her room was empty and was deeply disappointed to be told that she had already been discharged from hospital. All I could do was say goodbye to her in my thoughts, as I wished her all the best for her recovery. Before leaving the hospital, we stopped off at the pharmacy to collect my medicine. The pharmacist was very friendly and took the time to properly explain the warnings and possible side effects. When the time came to pay, Gerhard and I choked a little when we saw the cost of my 30 little pills. Our budget was tight because I was on unemployment benefits, and Gerhard had a very low income. Neither of us had medical insurance at the time, but we knew just how crucial this medicine was and that it was a real priority for me to take it. There was no question of doing without it. We were going to have to tighten our belts and dip into our savings if necessary. We had to trust that our finances would soon improve as Gerhard's business started to develop. I was also hoping to get back into the world of work once my maternity leave was over, if my mental health allowed me to. When we left the hospital and went to the parking lot, I felt both relieved to be leaving this place, which I would always associate with my mental illness, and also anxious, as I thought ahead to my recovery at home. My future was uncertain, and I had such little confidence in myself. But I knew that I had to keep my head up high and carry on bravely. I had to, for my son's sake.